Arizona isn't just sunshine and desert. Arizona is also a place with memories buried under dust, beneath old railroad tracks, and even under the surface of water. There were cities once busy enough to have schools, a jail, and hotels, and then within just a few years, they vanished as if they never existed. Some lived because a train had to stop. Some survived on Route 66 travelers pulling over. Others depended on a factory glowing hot day and night. But when the reason to exist gets cut off, everything falls into silence frighteningly fast. Today, I'm taking you through 10 abandoned cities in Arizona, where every location is a story left behind. Ready? Let's start right now. Number 10. Fairbank, Arizona. If someone told you an abandoned city in Arizona existed for one reason and one reason only, because a train had to stop there, you would probably laugh. But that is exactly what Fairbank was, a place built around a pause. Not a destination, a requirement. Fairbank sits beside the San Pedro River in southeastern Arizona, and its story starts in 1881 when the railroad arrived. At the time, nearby Tombstone was exploding from a dusty outpost into a silver-powered phenomenon rising into the tens of thousands in just a few years. The problem was simple. Tombstone didn't get the rail line. Fairbank did. So Fairbank became the gate. If you wanted supplies, mail, equipment, or a way to move wealth out of the desert, you funneled through this stop. Here is the strange part. Fairbank was never built to be glamorous. It was built to be useful. The kind of place with a depot, a general store, a schoolhouse, and just enough life to serve the wave passing through. Even its name carries that utilitarian DNA. In 1883, it was officially named Fairbank after an investor who helped finance the railroad, a reminder that this city was tied to money moving on tracks. And then the pressure point that most people miss. Fairbank was sitting on a massive land grant. In 1901, the Boquillas Land and Cattle Company bought that grant and evicted would-be landowners. Think about how quietly devastating that is. A place can survive droughts, dust, and bad years, but it cannot grow if nobody can truly own it. Fairbank became a community that could be rented, not rooted. Leases for the mercantile building and a few homes stretched on for decades, but the future was already being squeezed. Fairbank also carries a classic Old West shadow. In 1900, an attempted train robbery unfolded right at the station, the kind of headline that made places like this feel dangerous and electric for a moment, and then eerily calm again when the dust settled. By the early 1970s, Fairbank's day-to-day life had ended. What remains today is the quiet proof of the signature. This city lived because the train stop mattered, and it faded when the network moved on. The irony is that Fairbank is not erased. It is preserved. Managed public land, interpretive paths, restored structures, and open sky, where a working community used to be, and if a city can rise and fall simply because it was a doorway for someone else's boom, the next place on our list will make you wonder what happens when the doorway itself disappears. Number 9. Two Guns. If someone told you there is a forgotten city in Arizona that rose and fell because of a single road, your first instinct would be to shrug. Roads change all the time. Towns adapt. People move on. But Two Guns did not adapt. Two Guns was built like a mirage, and when the mirage broke, almost everything disappeared. A Two Guns sits out in Coconino County, roughly 30 miles east of Flagstaff, right on the edge of Cañon Diablo. On paper, it looks like nothing. In real life, it feels like a stage that was abandoned mid-scene. Wind, stone, sun, and a silence that gets louder the longer you stand there. The anchor of this place is not a courthouse, not a church, not a historic downtown. It is a bridge. The old Cañon Diablo Bridge was part of the Route 66 story, built for travelers who trusted a thin line of pavement to carry them across an unforgiving landscape. For years, that bridge meant movement, gas money, meals, postcards, and the simple comfort of seeing a light on the horizon after miles of empty desert. Then the road shifted, newer routes took over, and the bridge became a relic that cars no longer needed. When the traffic moved on, Two Guns lost the oxygen it depended on. That is the first strange truth about Two Guns. It was never a place you arrived to. It was a place you stopped at. In the early 20th century, entrepreneurs built up services for the stream of drivers who did not want to sleep in their cars. A trading post, food, fuel, promises of comfort. And then, something even more valuable than gasoline appeared: a story. Because Two Guns did not just sell supplies, it sold mystery. It leaned into a local legend tied to a cave nearby. A tale repeated so often that it began to feel like history, even as details shifted depending on who was telling it. Travelers came for the road, but they stayed curious for the narrative. The desert does that to people. It makes them want meaning. It makes them want a reason to pull over. And then the place cracked. A major fire in the early 1970s gutted the heart of the roadside operation, and what was left could not hold against the economics of a highway that no longer needed it. Without steady travelers, the businesses died. Without businesses, the community had no purpose. Two Guns became what it is now: stone ruins, faded walls, scattered foundations, and graffiti trying to shout over the quiet. Two Guns is the Route 66 Mirage City. It proves a brutal rule of the American road. If your entire life depends on strangers passing through, you live at the mercy of a map. And the next place on our list will take that rule even further, because there, the landscape itself refuses to let anyone stay. Number 8, Swansea. If someone told you there is an abandoned city in Arizona that didn't grow the normal way but was essentially built like a machine, you would probably expect a military base or a modern project. Swansea is neither. Swansea was a copper city engineered into existence in the middle of a place that never wanted a city at all. Swansea sits out in La Paz County, far from the kind of highways most people associate with Arizona travel. The isolation is part of the shock. You arrive and realize this wasn't just a few miners living in tents. This was a planned industrial community with one goal: turn ore into money out here, no matter what it cost. And the numbers make it feel unreal. By the end of 1908, the operation had built a smelter rated at about 350 tons, a massive furnace in a landscape that barely feels inhabited. They also ran a water pipeline roughly 3.5 miles from the Bill Williams River, because without water, a city like this can't exist, and the desert was not going to donate it. Around the mines, multiple shafts were sunk, and the whole site was organized around getting material out fast. By 1909, Swansea had grown to around 500 people. Think about that for a second. 500 lives, meals, routines, arguments, laughter, and exhaustion, all orbiting a furnace and a set of holes in the ground. It wasn't romantic, it was logistical, and it depended on one fragile lifeline: the railroad. A rail line connected Swansea to the outside world through bows, turning this remote camp into a functioning node in a larger economic network. But cities built like machines have a weakness. When the machine starts losing money, it doesn't slowly age. It stops. Financial trouble hit early, and by 1911, the operation was already shutting down, briefly sputtering back to life, and then collapsing again. The desert did not defeat Swansea at first. The spreadsheet did. For a moment, it looked like Swansea might survive. In 1914, a major company stepped in and rebuilt much of the town. That sounds like salvation, but it also reveals the truth: Swansea was never meant to stand on its own. It needed constant investment, constant demand, constant momentum. Then the larger world leaned in. By 1937, the mines closed for good, with the economic pressure of the Great Depression crushing what was left of the dream. When the work ended, the people vanished, and the city returned to silence. Today, Swansea is a skeleton of adobe and brick, foundations and scattered remnants, with the railroad grade cutting through the desert like a scar. The mine openings still sit there too, dangerous and dark, as if the ground is still waiting for the city to come back. Swansea proves something brutal about Arizona. You can force a city into being, but you can't force it to stay. And the next place on our list takes that idea even further, because there the city didn't just run out of money, it ran out of a reason to exist at all. Number 7, Ruby. The strangest abandoned places are not the ones that collapse into dust. They are the ones that still look like they could wake up tomorrow. And then you realize you're standing outside a locked memory. That is Ruby, Arizona, a ghost city so well preserved it feels almost unfair, and yet it is also a place you can no longer simply wander into. Ruby sits in Santa Cruz County, tucked into Bear Valley beneath Montana Peak, just a few miles north of the Mexican border. The setting alone does half the work. It's remote, quiet, and edged with that borderland tension where stories travel faster than facts. And for a while, Ruby was not a rumor. It was a working mining city with schedules, shipments, and a population big enough to feel permanent. Mining activity here traces back to the late 1800s when the camp was known as Montana Camp. By 1912, a post office opened under the name Ruby, and that name stayed official until the post office closed in 1941. Those dates matter because they anchor Ruby as more than a scenic ruin. At its peak in the mid-1930s, Ruby reached roughly 1,200 residents. That's not a handful of cabins. That's a community with a school, a jail, homes, and the daily noise of people trying to build a life in a hard place. Ruby's engine was the Montana mine. As industrial operators pushed production, the town gained an unusual kind of durability. Many ghost towns leave you foundations and scattered boards. Ruby leaves you buildings with roofs, walls that still hold their shape, streets you can trace with your eyes. It is often described as one of the most intact ghost sites in Arizona, and that's what makes it so haunting. The place doesn't feel erased. It feels paused. But Ruby also carries a shadow that never really left. In the early 1920s, a notorious series of incidents in the area sparked a major manhunt, the kind of story that stains a place for generations. Even if you don't know every detail, you can feel the weight of it in how people talk about Ruby. Not just as abandoned, but as remembered. Then the simple rule of extraction cities arrived. When the mine shut down in 1940, the future shut down with it. By late 1941, Ruby was effectively abandoned. People didn't leave because they stopped loving the valley. They left because the reason to stay vanished. And here is the final irony. Ruby did not become a ghost city that belongs to the curious. It remained private property, and after years of controlled access, it was closed to the public in June of 2024. So Ruby became the abandoned city you can see in photos, but not truly touch. And the next place on our list proves a different kind of abandonment, because there the ruins aren't protected by ownership. They're protected by the land itself. Number 6, Courtland. Courtland, Arizona is the kind of abandoned city that doesn't look like it simply faded away. It looks like someone shut it down, packed it up, and walked off with the parts. And that is exactly what makes Courtland so unsettling. It didn't just die, it got dismantled. Courtland sits in Cochise County in southeastern Arizona, often mentioned along the Ghost Town Trail near places like Pierce and Gleason, roughly 15 miles east of Tombstone. Today, if you pull up and look across the scrub and the open sky, you might wonder why anyone tried to build a city here at all. Then you learn how fast it happened, and the scene changes. In 1908 and 1909, copper turned this area into a magnet. Courtland exploded into a boom camp so quickly that within months it wasn't just tents and optimism. It was a functioning place with institutions. A post office was established in March of 1909, and by that same year, the town had its own newspaper. At its peak, sources placed the population around 2,000 people. 2,000. That is enough for a main street, enough for routines, enough for the kind of noise that makes a desert feel temporary. And Courtland didn't build small. This wasn't a lonely mining shack. This was a town that acted like it would be here forever. Accounts describe amenities that sound almost ridiculous in the middle of a hard mining district. An ice cream parlor, movie theater, even a baseball field, and a horse racing track. Those details matter because they reveal the real psychology of a boomtown. When money arrives fast, people start building a normal life before they've proven the ground can support it. One structure tells that story better than anything else: the Courtland Jail. Built in June of 1909, it was made of reinforced concrete and steel with 2 cells, and it reportedly cost about $1,000. That sounds like a small detail, but it says everything. Courtland had the confidence to pour concrete into the desert. It had the urgency to build a jail early, and it had the optimism to assume the rest would sort itself out. But the desert doesn't care about optimism, and neither does a commodity market. By 1911, the town's Chamber of Commerce was already focused on something painfully basic: securing a dependable water supply. When a city is scrambling for water while it is still in its growth phase, the clock is already ticking. As the mining fortunes shifted and the boom cooled, Courtland's future collapsed. People left, businesses closed, buildings were sold, moved, stripped, or swallowed by time. That is why so little remains compared to what once stood here. And yet the jail is still there, stubborn and exposed, like the last witness in a courtroom that no longer exists. Courtland is proof that some abandoned cities don't become ruins by accident. They become empty because the very thing that built them was never meant to last. Number 5, Vulture City. Vulture City doesn't feel like a ghost town that simply ran out of luck. It feels like a place that was switched off. One day it mattered, the next day it didn't, and the desert swallowed the silence like it had been waiting for permission. This abandoned city sits near Wickenburg, Arizona, and it grew around one of the most productive gold mines in the state's history, the Vulture mine. Over its lifetime, the mine produced staggering amounts of precious metal, figures often cited in the hundreds of thousands of ounces. That kind of output doesn't create a camp. It creates a system. It creates payrolls, supply chains, schedules, and a population that starts to believe the boom will last long enough to become normal. And Vulture City looked like a real city, not a few shacks and a dream. In its heyday, it had heavy industrial infrastructure built to keep the ore moving, a stamp mill that hammered rock into powder, an XA office that acted like the brain of the operation, measuring value and deciding what was worth shipping, blacksmith shops, warehouses, boarding houses, a cookhouse, and the kind of everyday places that turn survival into routine. When you see the remains today, you can still read the blueprint of that old life. It was a community engineered around one obsession: pull wealth out of the ground as efficiently as possible. But the desert always asks the same question: how are you going to live here? Water was the hidden struggle behind everything. Sources describe pumping and piping systems that had to move water to the mine and the town because without it, the whole project collapses into heat and dust. The city existed because people were willing to spend money just to make the environment tolerable. Then comes the part that makes Vulture City stand apart from other abandoned places. Many mining cities die slowly when prices drop or the ore thins out. Vulture City faced something more abrupt. In 1942, during World War II, the federal government issued an order that forced many gold mines considered non-essential to shut down so manpower and equipment could be redirected to the war effort. That single decision hit. Places like this, like a guillotine, if the mine was the heart, the order stopped it mid-beat. Once the work ended, the city emptied, families left. Businesses that depended on miners collapsed. Structures were abandoned in place because when a town is built around one employer, there is no graceful exit plan. There is only departure. Today, Vulture City is still standing in fragments, like a paused factory that never restarted. The ruins don't just tell a story about gold, they tell a story about power, about how a place can rise on the promise of extraction and then disappear when a distant decision rewrites what important means. And the next city on our list takes that idea into even darker territory, because there, the forces that emptied the streets weren't political. They were physical. Number 4, Charleston, Arizona is proof that some abandoned cities aren't built where the treasure is. They're built where the machine can run. And in the Old West, the machine didn't run on dreams. It ran on water. Charleston sat on the west bank of the San Pedro River about 9 miles southwest of Tombstone. Across the water was Millville, its working twin. Together, they formed a strange partnership that made perfect sense in the 880s. Tombstone was pulling silver out of the ground, but it didn't have the steady water needed to process ore at scale. So the heavy work moved to the river. Charleston and Millville became the place where raw rock turned into real money. This wasn't a couple of cabins clinging to a stream. Charleston was laid out like a real town site, mapped into blocks and lots, the kind of grid you build when you believe permanence is guaranteed. At its peak, it held a few hundred residents, and the atmosphere wasn't frontier romance. It was industrial urgency. Ore came in, mills stamped and crushed, bullion went out. Records describe a moment when the mills processed roughly $1.4 million worth of silver in a single year, a number that helps you understand why people were willing to plant a city in the river bottom and call it home. But when a city exists to serve someone else's boom, it lives on a borrowed heartbeat. In the mid-1880s, trouble hit Tombstone's mines. Water flooded underground workings, and the silver economy that fed the entire region began to stall. Charleston didn't need its own disaster to fall. It only needed Tombstone to stop producing. By 1889, Charleston and Millville were essentially ghost towns, their purpose cut off like a supply line. And Charleston's afterlife makes it even more unsettling. A normal abandoned town decays quietly. Charleston was used, stripped, rewritten. In the years after people left, much of the remaining lumber was taken for firewood, because in a harsh landscape, even a dead town is still a resource. Later, during World War II, the U.S. military used the site for training and gave it a nickname that sounds almost unreal: Little Tunisia. Imagine that for a second. A dead Arizona river town turned into a practice battlefield, its empty structures absorbing yet another chapter of history. Even the river that once made Charleston valuable kept working against it. The San Pedro's banks have shifted and eroded over time, and parts of what once stood here have been eaten away by the very water that gave the town its reason to exist. That is the cruel symmetry of Charleston, built for water, erased by water. Today, what remains is scattered adobe, stone remnants from the milling side, and a landscape that feels like it's trying to forget. And the next city on our list pushes that idea further, because there, the danger isn't water or war. It's a place where the ground itself becomes the threat. Number 3, Sasco. Arizona is one of the strangest abandoned cities on this list, because it wasn't built on a mine. It was built on a factory. In the early 1900s, this place existed for one job: take ore from the surrounding districts and turn it into usable metal. When that job ended, the city didn't slowly decline, it evaporated. Sasco sits in Pinal County near Red Rock, northwest of Tucson. Even the name gives away the real story. Sasco is short for Southern Arizona Smelting Company, a reminder that this wasn't a typical frontier settlement where people showed up and built whatever they could. This was an industrial plan, a company town designed around smelting, milling, and the machinery that kept an entire regional supply chain moving. The timeline is surprisingly tight. Sasco took shape around 1907, and the smelter was completed in early 1908. In the span of a few years, a working community formed around the plant. A post office opened in 1907 and would be gone by 1919. At its peak, accounts often placed the population in the range of 500 to 600 people. That number matters because it turned Sasco from a curiosity into a real city site. Families, routines, schools of thought, and a daily life tied directly to shifts, furnaces, and rail shipments. This was not small-scale labor. Sources describe the smelter employing around 175 men, and by 1910 processing roughly 245,000 tons of copper ore. Those numbers sound cold until you picture what they imply: constant heat, constant movement, and a town that lived by the rhythm of industrial output. When the furnaces ran, the city had a pulse, and then the pulse weakened. Sasco's problem was that it depended on production elsewhere. If nearby mining districts slowed, the smelter had nothing to feed on. After World War I, demand and output shifted, and in early 1919, Sasco shut down the Sasco smelter. That single change hit the town harder than any drought. Without the plant, there was no reason for workers to stay, no secondary economy to cushion the fall, and no alternate identity for the community to pivot toward. Today, Sasco leaves behind a set of visuals that feel almost too on the nose. The ruins of Hotel Rockland still stand like a hollow shell, as if travelers might check in if time restarted. Foundations and industrial remnants hint at where the plant once dominated the landscape. There is even a building often labeled City Hall, though it functioned more like a jail, a detail that makes the whole place feel like a stage set for a city that never had the chance to become ordinary. And then there is the cemetery, rows of simple concrete crosses in the desert, quiet proof that even short-lived industrial towns carried real human weight. Sasco is what happens when a city is built around one machine. When that machine stops, everything else stops with it. Number 2, Castle Dome Landing. Some abandoned cities disappear the normal way, roofs collapse, wood rots, sand moves in, and eventually the place becomes a rumor. Castle Dome Landing is different because part of it didn't just decay, part of it went underwater. This story starts on the Colorado River north of Yuma, where Castle Dome Landing once worked like a lifeline for the Castle Dome mining district. In the 19th century, this was not a cute old town. It was a loading point, a supply depot, a place built around schedules and cargo. Steamboats moving up from Yuma needed reliable stops, and Castle Dome Landing became one of those practical river ports where goods came in and ore, fuel, and ambition moved out. You can still feel the logic of it. A river town like this doesn't need grand architecture to matter. It needs a dock, storage, a few businesses, and enough people to keep the machine running. Historical summaries describe the kind of essentials you would expect in a working port settlement. A post office, a hotel, a saloon, a general store, even facilities tied to smelting and processing. At its peak, it was the sort of place where miners and freighters could eat, drink, rest, and reload before pushing deeper into the desert. The timeline is surprisingly specific, which makes the place feel real. The post office operating under the name Castle Dome Landing opened in August of 1878 and closed in June of 1884. That's only a handful of years, but in frontier logistics, a handful of years can reshape a region. For a moment, this landing mattered because the river mattered. And when the river route and regional patterns change, the landing's importance faded. But here is what makes Castle Dome Landing unforgettable. Today, the original landing site is often described as being submerged beneath the reservoir created by Imperial Dam in the Martinez Lake area. That means an entire chapter of this city's footprint is now hidden underwater, not erased by fire, not reclaimed by forest, simply covered, like history put under glass. And then the story doubles back on itself in the strangest way. On land, the ghost city returns. The name Castle Dome City is now tied to the Castle Dome Museum, where dozens of Old West buildings were salvaged and assembled into a walkable townscape. Sources describe more than 50 structures and a massive collection of mining artifacts pulled from hundreds of mines across the Castle Dome district. It looks like a place that never ended, even though the original river port did. So Castle Dome is a two-layer ghost city. One part drowned, one part rebuilt. One part you can't reach without imagination, the other you can step into like a frozen frame of the past. And the next city on our list pushes that idea into something even more unsettling, because there the place didn't vanish underwater. It vanished so completely that people still argue about what exactly is left. Number 1. Gila City. Some abandoned cities leave you rooftops, walls, and streets you can still walk. Gila City leaves you almost nothing, and that absence is the entire point. This is a ghost city where the mystery isn't what survived. The mystery is how a place could burn so bright and then vanish so completely that the landscape looks innocent again. Gila City sat along the south bank of the Gila River in what is now Yuma County, roughly 19 miles east of the Gila and Colorado confluence. It was founded in 1858 during the first major gold rush in Arizona history. Prospectors were drawn to placer deposits in the area around Monitor Gulch, and for a brief moment, the desert acted like it was printing money. Accounts describe miners pulling in daily earnings that sounded impossible for the era, and stories spread of large nuggets, including one said to weigh 22 ounces that ended up in a Wells Fargo office in Los Angeles. Whether you imagine those numbers as fortune or exaggeration, the effect was the same. People came fast. A town formed fast. That is why Gila City qualifies as a true city site for this list. It wasn't just a campfire circle of hopeful men. It had a post office established in late 1858 and operating until mid-1863, which tells you there was enough traffic and permanence, at least on paper, to justify official services. It also sat near one of the most iconic transportation stories of the 19th century, the Butterfield Overland Mail Route, with nearby stations tying the region into a larger network. In other words, this place was connected. It wasn't hiding from the world. It was trying to become part of it. But the Gila River is a brutal partner. Placer mining is thirsty work, and in a desert environment, water becomes the real currency. There were ambitious attempts to solve that problem with machinery, including efforts to bring in steam-powered equipment and even a stern wheel vessel to support operations. The plans failed, logistics broke, costs rose, and the people who had come chasing quick wealth began to leave when the easy gold started thinning and the hard work demanded more water than the land could reliably provide. Then the final chapter arrived in the form of the Great Flood of 1862. In the American West, floods don't just damage, they rewrite. Historical accounts describe the floodwaters sweeping away what remained of Gila City, turning a short-lived boomtown into a blank space. That is why you can stand in the region today and struggle to point to anything and say, this was the street, this was the store, this was the life. Time didn't slowly erase Gila City. Water did it in a rush. And that is what makes this place so unsettling. Most ghost cities feel like memories you can touch. Gila City feels like a memory that refuses to hold still. It was born from gold, connected by mail routes, and then wiped clean by a river that never signed up to protect anyone's dream. Arizona's abandoned cities are not just empty places on a map. They are receipts, proof of how fast a boom can build a community and how even faster one decision, one disaster, or one broken supply line can erase it. From railroad gateways and Route 66 mirages to smelter towns that lived on machinery, to river ports that vanished underwater, every stop on this list leaves the same warning written in dust. Nothing lasts if the reason to exist disappears. Now I want to hear from you. Which city felt the most unsettling, and which one would you actually visit if you had the chance? Drop your pick in the comments and tell me what you think really killed it. Money, nature, or the system? If you enjoyed this kind of hidden history road trip, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications because the next list gets even darker.